Hello. Today I kind of wanted to talk about how to exist in a hostile world. It is one of those things that it's not very normal. It's something that I think I have been able to properly accept that there are some things about my life that I have no control over. That they don't really, like there's only so much I can do. And I think that the journey to accepting that fact is kind of. It's very fundamental, very necessary for anyone to kind of like get to a point where they can have peace of mind. Because if you're kind of being kind of like stressed around like a plastic bag, I know I've been using this metaphor a lot lately, but it does sometimes really describe how I feel. And I am at a point where I really just want peace. I want external things will naturally like affect us, but I don't want to be more affected than I have to be. I don't want to be put down. Basically, I don't want every situation I encounter to be kind of like a big challenge. I want things to normalize. Oh yeah. Also, before I continue, my hair, like I washed it, so like the tips, they're kind of like they're bluer than they are purple, but I really like this color. It reminds me of the first time I ever bleached my hair was back in 2014. It was the end of the year, and the second time I bleached it was like April or maybe August, was somewhere. No, yeah, it was kind of like I don't know, it was at some point in 2016, and my hair, the tips, they were kind of like these colors, which is kind of like this grayish blues. I don't think you can see them so well. Let me see if this helps. But yeah, it's kind of like this very nice bluish color, so it reminds me of that. But back to what I was saying. I have, like I just went to my therapy session with, like a health center, therapist, and I don't know. I think that today was like, because some days it doesn't feel like super productive because I can be kind of combative sometimes. Like I try not to be, but there are some things that get me kind of like a response out of me. I don't think this necessarily happened today. I think that I was, was open, I was forthcoming, I was able to kind of like break down the things that I think and why is that I think that way. Because yesterday was a moment of instability for me, and but thankfully I've been able to put it in the past. I basically decided that I'm not continue reading like the book that I was reading, and that's I think that in itself already like lifted a weight off my shoulders, because I think one of the reasons that I was feeling so tense regarding like the whole thing is because I end up getting back to the point where like I'll have to kind of like consume this again. So like it's not just going to be today that I'm being hurt, it's going to happen tomorrow and the day after, so on and so forth, until I finish the novel. I don't know if you qualify as a novel, but until I finish the book. And I think that once I was like, yes, I'm not touching this again, my head was, like it went to a really, like healthy place where I was just, feeling kind of like, stable, and that, the things were no longer bothering me, and I was no longer thinking of death or anything like that. But in the same vein of what, what I've been saying lately is, the fact that, as I said, like you have to kind of like learn how to exist in a hostile world, and that is, something that, like you gain, you get from experience. Kind of like is the thing that teaches you, because you can kind of like know it like in theory that like, okay, this thing is going to be bad for me and I'm not gonna focus on it. But it can also be so like experience, kind of like I don't know, like living through situations like that. Like that's how you learn. And there is always going to be there's always going to be drawbacks, there's always going to be side effects to things. And I really think that you have to kind of like think ahead. You have to think about that is going to happen, but sometimes this experience is the thing that kind of like makes the difference between you kind of like processing something in a healthy way and you kind of like not processing something at all. And as I said, like sometimes like it's very tempting for you, instead of like processing whatever is happening, for you to just push things away, and that is not helpful. Like it might solve the situation at that point in time, but like that thing you're pushing away is going to come back, and it's going to come back with a vengeance, basically, because it's going to kind of like fester in your head. You're going to things are going to become like harder to handle, harder for you to deal with them, and they are going to affect you in ways that you're not really seen, you don't really anticipate, because everything in your brain is connected. Everything, it kind of like leads to something else. So, which is why whenever I think about my traumas, and I think about the things, the areas of vulnerability that I had when I was younger, I see a lot of like gaps between the things. There were a lot of like leaps that I had to take for me to get from point A to point B, but the reason why those leaps existed was because of my fear and because of my trauma. Like my trauma made me kind of like very hesitant to handle some things, made me very hesitant to kind of like fully put myself out there, and as a consequence, everything was very much internalized. Like I was at this point where there was no end in sight. I was surrounded by this sea of like this sea of distrust and of pain, and I couldn't really see kind of like no way out. And sometimes like it's going to take a while for you to kind of like disarm these things, because that's kind of like the situation. You have to disarm your brain, like all these triggers that you have to kind of like disarm them, sometimes one by one. And sometimes like you kind of like, I think once you get a certain momentum going, it becomes easy. You can end up being able to disarm several things in a row. But until you get to that point, like it is baby steps, like it's very small steps, and you have to trust the process, because as I said, like you don't really see an end to any of that. So you have to trust that by kind of like working on yourself in those minor things, like that is going to lead to an improvement, that is going to lead to growth, and that is going to that is going to lead you to a way out. And this is an idea that I think that in general I've been able to maintain, because I think these days, if something happens that kind of like leads to panic, or something like that, like it is much easier for me to believe that there is a way out, because I've already been out. Like I've already experienced that before. I have already been able to disarm a bunch of things, and it's, as I said, like just like anything else, like it's easier said than done. But I do think that there is kind of like this snowball effect, that you start small and then you start increasing, improving, like and that gets to a point where, sorry, okay, I may have consumed too much dairy just now, so yeah, feeling a little, but anyways. But yeah, so like it gets to a point where like it becomes easier. So for example, kind of like like the trigger number 100 that I had to kind of like disarm took much less, and you end up happening much more much more quickly than trigger number 1. And I think that, as I said, because everything's connected, so I think the first ones, like they are going to be the hardest for you to break through, because there's just so much at stake. Sometimes like when you look on the outside, it doesn't seem like the stakes are too high, but for you, when you're going through that, like the stakes are as high as they could possibly be. And I don't know, I think you just have to trust yourself. But sometimes it's hard to get to the point where you can't trust yourself, because there might have been situations where trusting yourself did not prove to be the best. But it's not because like you're not reliable, it's just that you sometimes, like, it is not you talking, it's the trauma talking. So you end up kind of like in situations where kind of like you're in defense mode, and as I talked about before, tense, you're very tense, there's a lot of tenseness, like physical tenseness that comes from like these situations. And it's important for you to kind of like be able to recognize like your limitations when it comes to that. It's important to recognize that, like, yeah, doing this it's going to be uncomfortable, like, because disarming things like that is going to be it's a journey, and there are different types of discomfort. I think that sometimes, like, there are things that are going to happen and they'll make you uncomfortable, but like the idea, what you should be doing, what you should be focusing on is on your ability to handle that. Because sometimes you suffer unnecessarily. So sometimes, like, a situation is going to hurt you, and there is a way for it to hurt less. You should break down why it is that it makes you feel that way, why it is that it has the effect on you, and you address that trauma. Like, some things, new things, they become less comfortable. For example, yesterday I had like a moment, I don't want to call it a moment of weakness, it was just a moment. I also don't want to use the word relapse, because I don't know, I think it implies that I don't know, I had this moment yesterday, where I had some thoughts that I haven't really been having lately, and that was something that really worried me, and that like it kind of like made, like yeah, it got me worried about the future, because like, is this the beginning of something? Is this just like the end? Where exactly does this situation land? In terms of yeah, like because how hard do I have to fight this? And I think yesterday I ended up succeeding, because I ended up embracing where I was at mentally. So instead of like trying to fight it, I was yeah, I just kind of accepted it, and I was just like, yes, let me feel this fear, let me feel this discomfort. And it's not pleasant, it's never going to be pleasant to be uncomfortable, but you have to kind of like get used to it to some extent, because for you to get through that situation, like you have to move past it, you have to experience those things. And that's pretty much where the thing I was saying with like with us kind of like having an understanding that there is going to be discomfort, because so you have to know like how much do you have to withstand it, and how much like you can try to change in the future, because ultimately like you kind of like we're living through these situations. So it's kind of like we are floating through the sea, and there are all these different islands, and sometimes we're gonna get stuck on these islands. And but like your journey doesn't have to be as painful as it once was. You don't have to compare, I guess, like yourself with other people when it comes to this. But it is interesting to have kind of like that that reference. But I think at least the way that I do things is like I try to compare myself with myself. So I want to know today how I am compared to like myself a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, so on and so forth. And I can safely, and I can like very confidently say that like the way I'm doing things right now is much better than it was a year ago, and the year before, and so on and so forth. And I think that is ultimately kind of like what I want. I'm not aiming for perfection, because perfection is not going to happen, but I can aim for betterment. I can aim for peace of mind. As I mentioned before, it is kind of like my goal. It's pretty much what I want. So in terms of how to exist in a world that is hostile, towards you, I guess like there's no recipe, because as I said, pain, it kind of like it comes and goes, and each time, and sometimes like I don't know, I think it's one of those things that you cannot really learn. Pain, you cannot really it's kind of like you don't necessarily get used to it, basically. Like you, yeah, like uh, I think that you kind of forget it. Like, so you think about it when you're going through a painful situation, but like the moment like you break free, you kind of like get used to the lack of pain, which means that whenever something new comes across, I think that it is possible for you to handle pain better, but like I think that the betterment in that context would be more like how do I continue to operate when I'm experiencing this pain, because that you're not going to be able to perform at as you would when like you're not in pain, as when everything is normal. But I think that you can learn to do more, and you can kind of like have a better outlook on the situation. I'm not trying to say that there should be blindly positive, optimistic, but it is I don't know, I think that there is there are like ways for you to feel like less sad, less like depressed because of the pain. And I think that is there's a long way to go. Like, it's not really something easy, but it is something that you can learn. And I think that for me, this is kind of like where I am at right now, because since yesterday there's been other situations that have been kind of like coming and going. They're kind of like threatening to they're not at a point they're threatening to erupt or anything, but like they are in my mind, and I want sorry, and I want to like to do better. As I said, like I want to not be as affected. So how do you handle, I mean, I don't have the answer. How do you deal with a world that is hostile towards you? I don't know. I don't really have a concrete answer, but like I am in the searching for this answer, which is what like this video is about, for me, just getting my ideas out there, and like kind of getting to a point. because, as I said, I'm tired of, suffering. I think everybody's tired of suffering. I mean, you could say that some people, they get used to it to the point that they kind of like they don't really see a world without it. And I think that that is kind of dangerous. Like, I think you're going to burn out very quickly if like you're just carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. So that's what I'm trying not to do. Not that I've ever, like, been at that point. Like, I'm not out here. I don't like suffering in silence, basically. And I'm not saying that I'm screaming and shouting when I'm in pain, but like, I'm not suffering in silence, basically, because I feel that also it is not helpful, because particularly when it comes to like physical pain, like not so much, but like emotional pain, like pain that you feel from situations that happen in your life and all that. You are kind of like poisoning yourself in a certain way, like you're just which is not what we want, what what anyone should want for themselves. And as I said, I'm kind of like at a point where I don't know, because I feel like that's very there's a very there's a very fine line between like you suffering in silence and you making yourself a martyr. And I feel like that is a very dangerous mindset for you to be in, kind of like just, like putting yourself on a pedestal and kind of like just, being like, oh, this is my pain, because that is not particularly healthy, also not helpful to you, because sometimes like when you share your pain, like that is when you start to find solutions, you start to find alternatives. So yeah, I've never been one to suffer. I mean, actually, like that is not 100% true, because there were so many things about me that I internalized. It wasn't until like my first big attempt back in 2019 that I was like, okay, I have to talk about these things, because if I don't, it's going to happen again. And it has since then happened. I mean, I never succeeded, which is no great, because I do enjoy being alive. But it is something to consider, that I think that I wasn't really making myself a martyr or anything like that. I was just I know I didn't I felt like I could handle it, on my own. And I kind of, I mean, like this, for example, when you go to therapy, you're going there so you can learn, the tools for you to be able to handle things on your own, but you're kind of like enlisting help. And it's because I did do therapy before, but I think that I wasn't really getting into like the nitty gritty of everything that was happening in my head. Also, like there's some things that I was very much not comfortable, because I was like, this is my private life. I don't want anybody to be invested and involved here. This is me and just me. These days I'm much more open, which I think it's been very helpful. Because sometimes, as I said, like, because also, for example, if you have a problem and you just keep it in your head, you might not be able to find a solution. But the moment you bring it up to somebody else, they might be able to help you. They might be able to offer, some type of, some experience, some type of wisdom, something that is going to help you, and also like not good to internalize things, like that is not good. And I will say that in general, I don't do that anymore. But sometimes, like, there's like these hints of past behavior that kind of like they go of, like they're not caught by my radar. And yeah, that's kind of like that. But back to what I was saying about like me kind of like feeling that I could handle it on my own, because technically I'm handling on my own. But as I said, like I got tools, and I share with people around me where I am at, and that is very important. For example, my parents, they are the people I'm the closest to. I talked about this before, and I'm very open with them about the things that are happening, and that is really helpful to me, because they can kind of like, because if I'm kind of like, am I getting a little manic or a little bit depressed, I ask them for them to keep an eye on me, and then they give me their opinion. And sometimes they will catch something that I didn't, because sometimes they're just so stuck in your own ways, in your mind, that you don't really notice other situations that are happening. There's stuff that like, and sometimes like it's just we're all human. There's only that's like, we might kind of like miss something, and there's no reason for you to feel you know feel bad about it. Because, for example, today something happened. Oh yeah, I had a test for an internship position, like in the area of that I'm studying right now. So I was talking about my professional life and how I wanted to be working in my area. If I pass this, because there's the test, so I went and did the test, and if I pass, there's going to be an interview, so I might end up finding employment in this area, and I'm really happy about that. It just everything's falling into place. But what I'm trying to say is that the test, I ended up doing it in like in 20 minutes. It was 20 questions, so it was kind of like 1 minute per question, and I'm happy with my performance. Like there were a couple of things there that like I didn't know, but you know, like I tried to read, because a lot of like this test, the way that the answers are phrased, like it's already like telling you a lot about you know what, you know, something about how to answer it. And then I was out, and I thought it was going to be longer because I had 2 hours to finish the test. So I called my mom and I was like, hey, is there anything that we need to do, that I could do? And then we're gonna go tomorrow. We end up having to go tomorrow again, because I wasn't able to read. So let me explain this to you. But there was some stuff lost. So I think it's like a lot of things that we have to do downtown. I was looking at the list that we have, like it's over 10 things. So you know, dozen different things that I have to do in a dozen different places. But you know, it's fun. I enjoy going out. My mom also enjoys going out. So tomorrow's afternoon, like we're going to kind of like go there again. But I went there and I struggled so much to find a certain street. I was there, like I'm not even exaggerating, for like almost an hour. I kept going back and forth. I mean, it doesn't help that you know, like it's downtown, so I don't want to walk with my phone. So usually I have to go somewhere, you know, some store, some establishment, and then I will check, and then I'll go, and then I kind of like, so I kind of ended up going back and forth. And I was telling you know, my parents that like this whole situation made me feel so incompetent, because I was like, why am I struggling so much to find a street? It should not be that hard. But you know, my dad said something that was like, hey, sometimes this happens. Sometimes we have some, you know, it's kind of like we bug, you know, like we're not machines, but there is, you know, like some truth to there. So basically, as I said, I did find one thing, which was my mom. She kind of like writes this, you know, letters for, you know, like the police officers who kind of like guard in prisons, people in prisons, like those professionals. And during like, you know, she kind of like she handwrites them, you know, and it's like 500. So she kind of like does a little bit every day, and because this is a lot, and she likes to use a little tape that, you know, says Merry Christmas. And we kind of like usually have to find it throughout the year. And basically I went to one of the stores that we go to get this, you know, strips, and I found three of them. They're saying Merry Christmas. They're not cheaper. You would think that, you know, like it is April, so you know it would be different, but it's not. But it's still like it is something, you know. So I did find those, you know, very lucky for my part. I kind of like just came with the whole idea that like things are falling into place today, because I think the way that I was able to do the test, like I think it really got me thinking that like, okay, this is a possibility, you know. So that's kind of like something. But yeah, but basically I found this, and then I spent the rest of my time there. I mean, I did go to some stores. I found these cookies, which I ate too much. I've been struggling today with eating too much. One of the reasons I decided to come here right now is because I just had, you know, a little snack, and it was already kind of like a lot, and I kind of wanted more. So I was like, okay, let me just go and wait it out. So I am here. I mean, I was going to kind of like do it regardless, but like I ended up deciding to do this right now. But yeah, but like I was looking for the street for almost an hour. Okay, maybe like, okay, for some 45 minutes at least, because I feel like an hour, because you know, I also went to this, because basically like there were like different things that we had to get in different places, different streets, and I kind of like mixed it up. So basically I was looking for the wrong thing in that street, you know, or was looking for that thing in the wrong street. So I went from one side to the end of it. I went also to the end of it, to the other side, and I found one thing. So that was, you could argue that, you know, it was a waste of time, but at least I like going out. So it's particularly nice when you go out and you don't spend any money. I have kind of like this assignment. I've kind of like assigned myself, you know, like this idea that I don't want to spend any money on, you know, I mean, not say any money for a month. I was going to do this in May, but I'm like, no, what, let me start today. I failed because I bought, you know, these cookies. But you know, it was just that, like I saw many other things that I wanted to buy, most all of them food related, but I didn't. So, you know, self-control. But I'm going to start that, you know, tomorrow. So it's going to be April 16th to like May 16th. I don't want to buy anything, you know, naturally, like I'll have, because I would be, it's not like I will be paying my bills, so there's that. There's, you know, for example, stuff, if I have, you know, something from you know, from school, some material I have to buy, I'm gonna buy that. If I have something uh, unless the exception being like things that I already wanted to buy before, but I didn't because I was waiting for like the price to drop, and then the price drops. That's going to be one exception that I make for things that they're already on my list. But yeah, but because I kind of like want to save more money, and I think that because I'm in a really good point right now where I think that I've been able to postpone my gratification for something, so I really want to enjoy like this. I want to take this moment that I'm like this and I'm making like more progress, because like you will never, I mean, you could regret like not spending money, but I feel like if something really overwhelming kind of like happened that made me kind of like think that way, I would most likely make an exception. But that's the thing, I don't want to make exceptions. But yeah, so let's see how it goes, because even that's the thing, like even if I fail to like not consume anything, because I have this rule, like I'm going to be buying less, regardless. So for example, I'm not planning on going out, for any type of meal, dinner, lunch, whatever. I have this, like times where I go. I'm not planning on meeting anyone, going out with friends or like relatives or anything, and I'm not going to go and just the thing that I've already failed at, which is like not buying stuff from like the stores where they sell snacks and chocolates and stuff for cheap. I'm not falling into temptation, although I have already fallen into temptation today. But yeah, but I think that I had this kind of like idea of not spending any money, and it was very helpful because I think that if I hadn't established this for myself, I would have bought at least like 2 or 3 more things, and tomorrow is going to be a test because my mom and I will have to go buy a lot of things, but get a lot of things done, and I will not be buying anything, like no snacks, because I think that's like one of the biggest kind of like expenses that I have. It's like snacks, which is like, okay, it's just one thing here, one thing there, and they're all cheap, but like they kind of end up piling up, and they add up to be kind of like a significant amount. And like every even if I'm able to save 100 bucks, like that is already a significant, that is already something. And also I think that as talking about gratification, I'm thinking more about the future. So for example, tattoos, like that is something that I want more of, and I have all these ideas with me, and I kind of, I don't know how to put this, but I basically, I don't know, like it's not that hard. I don't know why I'm saying that I can phrase this. No, it's not. It's just that I can kind of like I postpone. So like for example, this money that I'll be saving, if I think that I'm like saving for this tattoo, like that is going to help. And I'm thinking, how exactly am I thinking about the money I'll be saving? I think that I will be, half of it is going to be for my fund, the one my investments, the ones that I'm saving in case I want to buy a car, a house. I know it's a lot of money, but I've been saving on and off for decades, so I have something. And the other half of it, I will allow myself to kind of do something momentary, but maybe I won't, because that's the thing. Sometimes you really want something in the moment, you really want that thing, but if you kind of like deprive yourself of said thing, you kind of like lose interest. So for example, I'm saying that I'm gonna save, half of it is going to be for my savings, and half of this is going to be for me to kind of like buy something. I might not really, for example, go out for dinner. For example, Outback Steakhouse, it is one of my favorite restaurants. I don't know, I think it's kind of cringe, but I don't care. I really like, because the thing is that I have issues with meat. I usually, particularly pork, I don't really like the taste, except theirs. I mean, not just that, but right now I've been able to find like more examples of pork that I like, but like it's still something. Well, basically, it's still something that so I really like the food there, and I like going there, and that is pretty much and I there was a point in time where I'm not gonna do this month, where I would kind of like go there like once a month, and I'll have some dinner, or I'll have like lunch or something, and it was very fun, very nice. But I'm not doing that this month, as I said, and also like I wouldn't do it anyways, because I ended up going twice last month, specifically because they have some items that they're kind of like here for limited time only, so I wanted, and it was a good idea because they're already out, so I waited for like right now, like I wouldn't get it. But yeah, so I kind of like, I have a vision of what I want You know, like when I go to my phone, my app, on my bank, the app, my bank's app, and I'm looking at the expenses. I have a goal that I don't want it to go. I want to be able to see everything in one, shot, just once, screenshot. That would be kind of like beautiful. Naturally, there are lots of expenses, and I don't know, but the way, anyways. I don't even know how I started talking about this, but I was talking about feeling incompetent, and how my dad was like, "Hey, it happens to the best of us," and then my mom and my dad, they shared situations where they also kind of like felt lost. For example, my college, my college campus, the university campus, so you have like my college, like the main building. When you're kind of like there, not only the building, but like also because it is a really large place, so it's kind of like easy to get lost. And I was like, you know what, like that is true, we all have these moments. But I'm not gonna lie, I felt really incompetent. I'm not feeling that anymore, but what I was feeling, that was that. I don't know why did I went on this tangent back to what I was talking about. So I think that the theme for this week, when it comes to like me, self-improvement, realizations, and findings and all that, I want to kind of like get a concrete answer on how to kind of like survive in a world that is hostile towards you. And I kind of because I'm now focusing not so much on actions, like things that you can do to, for example, get people to be less bigoted. Like not that, it's just like with me, just in my head, like what can I do to kind of like be less hurt about these awful things they're sometimes said. I say sometimes, but I say sometimes because I've been pushing stuff away. I'm not really on social media, I'm not seeing things, but I know that if I were to see it, there will be something there every day. Some bad news, some troubling news, and I kind of want at this point in time for things to not affect me so much. That is kind of the gist of everything that has to do with me. I want to be able to kind of like to live in peace. I think that's just the gist of it. Like I don't want things and people to take away my peace. I want to be able. I want to be resilient. I want to be fearless. Naturally, you're always going to be. You're going to fear something. So when I say that I want to be fearless, it's the same thing with like my savings. I'm aiming for fearlessness, but I'm totally okay if I fear something. And I think if I kind of like keep this in mind, I keep kind of like making an effort of like no longer being afraid. I will be less afraid. But naturally, it's just like willing yourself to be less afraid is not effective. It doesn't really do anything. I mean, sometimes it does. It can be helpful, but I really do. But like I want to kind of like think of measures, of like things that I can do that will have some type of effect on my psyche. So that's kind of like that, so sometimes it's just going to be as simple as you just saying like I'm not afraid, or fear is the mind killer, which is what I think I mentioned yesterday that I've been saying a lot, and it has been helping somehow. I don't know, I think that because it's not just because there's a power there, I think that you're kind of like just soothing yourself, right? So this is self-soothing, and you're just like I'm not afraid, fear is the mind killer, I'm not afraid. And then whenever I say I'm not afraid, I remember the Eminem song, so I start kind of like singing it a little bit, and it's been kind of helpful. I don't know, I wasn't expecting that, but like one more strategy, one more thing for me to try. But ultimately, like it all boils down to fear. This is not something that I have found out today. It's been like a week, so it's not the oldest thing that I've known about myself, but it's also like not the most recent. I think I knew that before yesterday, and I think because I know that yesterday I was able to kind of like create a situation in my head where eventually I broke free from like the chains that were kind of like shackling me to a metaphorical wall. And I feel free right now. If I'm thinking about all the bad things that are happening, and the bad things that could happen if things keep going the way they are, and I'm not panicking. I'm not even feeling those thoughts of death or anything. I'm just existing, and this is what I want more of. I think this is the key. to live in a world that is hostile towards you. Like you need to strengthen yourself, because as I said, experience, like, it gets you a long way. It kind of like, it really does guide you for a while. But you have to make an effort, because like experience doesn't inherently teach you anything. You have to be open to kind of like to learn and to do more. And that is basically where I am at right now. Like, I'm trying to kind of like make sure that the experience I have is not just something trifling, something that just is going to pass and I'll forget it. Like, no, I want my life to be yeah, I want like every moment to be an example of like what I can do and what I can follow. And I don't know, I feel like this is already happening, because it's not like a switch that you can turn on or turn off. It is a yeah, like it's not a switch. It's kind of like you have to make an active effort to learn. But your disposition, there is kind of like it's not an on and off switch, but like if you kind of like you're willing to learn, I think that you get used to it. So you get to a point where you are like not even trying to be open, but that is already happening, because that's like how habit, that's how you train yourself to be. And I really don't think that there's much more to be said about that. So, to sum up, how do you live in a world that is hostile towards you, in a world that is trying to take you down? You have to kind of like, and once again, like, I'm not talking about activism, things that you can do to change it. Talking about like you yourself in your head. And basically, you have to kind of like deal with your fears, because even if your fears are founded, which a lot of times they are, there is nothing you can do about some of these things. Like, you are one person, you don't have a reach, there's not much you can do. So what you can do is like make peace with that. And as I said, like, I think I want to be stronger, in the sense that I want to be able to withstand like whatever thing is thrown my way, like actions, words, anything. Like, I don't want to kind of like be sad and be upset about them, because as I said, like, it's not going to change, and it's very hard for you to change anyone's opinions, anyone's thinking. And I'm not trying to be kind of like pessimistic here, but it's just kind of like usually how things have gone in my experience. But I'm not saying that you should give up. I'm just saying that like I would rather focus on like the internal kind of like dealings of my of my brain. Like, how exactly do I kind of like put up how do I, because it's not about like putting up a fight. I think that is important, and I'm grateful to like everybody who does that, because I know that I may not be out there advocating for myself and for my rights, but there are people who are doing that for me, not for me specifically. They're doing that for like me, as in the person who is in a certain demographic group. So I'm very grateful to them. And you could argue like I should probably say something and do more, and maybe one day I'm gonna go back to doing that, because I used to do that a lot when I was younger. But right now, all about protecting my peace, as I said, which means kind of like removing certain things. Like, yeah, so for example, social media. It's been years since I have had it, and it's I don't know, like my life has just been better since I've abandoned it. And naturally, sometimes some people, like, you cannot really do that, because your livelihood, your job depends on that. So I'm not saying that if everybody should log off, although like it would be better for people individually if they could like let go. But as I said, it's important that people stand up for what's right, or whatever you want to classify that as. So I'm grateful for those people. I'm just not gonna be one of them right now. Maybe one day, as I said, I will get back and I will fight the good fight, but right now that is not really where I am at. But yeah, so just you have to I want to be, basically I want to be a more resilient person. It's kind of like like I was gonna say the gist of it, but I think I already said this like 10 times in this video. But I want those things to not hurt so much. And I think that if I compare myself today, comparing to like myself from a year ago, I'm already doing much better. I'm already kind of like thriving, where I'm kind of thriving, not thriving 100%, but like I'm at a good 80%, and that is, like way above average. Like that is, if this was school, like 80%, like. I mean, I've studied in some places where the average was 60, some places where the average was 70, but either way, 80 is above that. So, very happy about it. So I think that what I'm trying to say is that I need to be stronger, in the sense that I want to be stronger, in the sense that things are not going to, I don't know, like not necessarily things, but like words specifically, because I think I know how to handle like a punch better than I can handle some, things being said. And I think that this is something I want to change about myself. I don't want to, I'm not saying that you should just accept that some of these things are going to happen, but the thing is, like, they're going to happen regardless of whether you want them or not. So I want to be able to just, like, to not care, because the thing is that whenever I hear something, I feel the urge to say something, and that usually, and I'm not great at de-escalating situations, much to the contrary. Usually when I'm like in that mindset, like, I want to escalate things, I want things to get, not that I want things to get terrible or awful, but it's just that I can't hold myself back, which I know is bullshit. I know, that is not an excuse. That wouldn't, if I were in court, like, that would mean nothing. But yeah, but I want to kind of like be able to overlook certain things. Maybe overlook, it's not the word, but I want some things to enter inside, leaving the other, and like, no engagement from my part. And I think like, that is, something, because that it could be kind of like easier, for me to do than maybe some other people, because my surroundings, people, even the bigots, they're kind of like kind bigots. They're still saying, like, the bottom line of what they say, it's still pretty much the same of the aggressive ones, but like, they're saying that with love, love, kind of. So there's that. But like, it's easier for you to, like, forgive people like that, and it's easier for you to kind of like overlook what's being said. And that's kind of like where I am at right now. I want to, I want the things that are here to not cause such turmoil, because the thing is also, like, you could say, like, right, just don't say anything, but I could technically force myself not to say something, but like, that's not what I want. I still will be, sick inside. So I wanted to generally, like, not feel the need or the urge to engage. I want to walk away. I think that is, like, my life would probably be much better a lot of times if I walked away. But then there's pride. There's my pride and my arrogance, because I don't want to, I want to be the one, the last word. I want to say something. I don't want to let it slide, even though, like, that is probably what would be, because also, like, so when you let it slide, because when I say something, usually it's easier for me to move on. If I don't say anything, I have like that kind of like, just, I don't know, it's just like stirring something in my brain. I'm kind of, yeah, I feel, and so there is, as I said, like, pride, because I feel like I should have said something. I should have, like, massacred this person, but not particularly helpful. I know this is not, but this is kind of like how my brain works. It's always kind of worked like this. I think my trauma made it worse, but it is interesting, because I'm gonna pivot to a completely different topic. But basically, the other day I was kind of like assessing, myself, and I realized that, like, in high school, because for the longest time I was very kind of like adamant that I was not shy. I was just not engaging because I didn't have, the desire to engage with people, and both of those things were true. Like, I didn't really feel like interacting, but if I were to have interacted, I would probably feel, kind of shy about it. I don't know, and I think that, it is interesting for me to kind of like think about, like, what made me feel shy, what made me feel, like, all these different ways. And I think that, for example, one thing that was there is like my lack of experience, because I grew up in a very religious environment, and like everything I knew was religion until like I started high school. I went to a different school. It was only like a high school, so like nobody knew each other. So there was that, because it's not uncommon here for a school to go from kindergarten to kind of like to the end of high school. So for example, like the school I left, everybody went to the first year of high school, and it was the same people. So kind of like close. Also, like my school, because it was also a technical school, like you can only get into the first year. Second and third, like it's usually it's the same people. I mean, you could maybe change from like one unit of school, but like I don't know if that would happen, simply because like these locations were like geographic. Like, I don't know, like I mean, maybe you were moving to a different city, so that could happen. But anyways, and I was kind of so I felt like I was missing out in a certain way. I felt like not that I was missing out, that I had missed out, because at that point I had, for example, I never drank anything, I never smoked anything. The only experience I had, when it comes to making out, for example, was kind of like against my consent, and everything. And also like I ended up having some amnesia, kind of like post that. So I basically didn't have, I didn't have any consensual, sex things happening in my life. So that was, so I don't know, I just look at everybody, and everybody was like around the same age, but it felt like everybody had already tried everything, and I was, kind of like, I was inexperienced, and that is something that really triggered me, like the feeling of being experienced, because of the trauma that happened when I was 13. I really felt like, if I had a little more malice, a little more, a certain je ne sais quoi, like regarding like, being perceiving, what's happening, it kind of like felt like, oh, that would not have happened. So whenever it had to do with me being kind of like, being inexperienced, being naive, being gullible, like all those things, they really shook me to my core, because of that experience. But I never knew that at the time, and it's interesting because there are a couple of situations that I think back from like the era of my life, and how I was kind of like more outgoing, and usually it was with people who was like less outgoing than me. So for example, we went to this UN simulation thing. It was 2013. It was my first year of high school, and I was in the hotel, in a, in the hotel room I was in was another girl from like the same, yeah, like another girl, from this was from same year but like different class, and she was also very shy. She wasn't talking a lot. So with her, I'm finding myself talking a little bit more. I was kind of yeah, I was just talking more, and that trip was very like significant in a lot of like different ways, because I don't know, I think I learned a lot about myself, or at least I acknowledged a lot about myself. I think that I talked about it before, how my first very intense experience with envy, and jealousy, like it happened there. And it was one of those moments that like it literally kept me awake. Like I struggled to perform, to sleep, because of like how much how intensely I was feeling that. So it is an interesting situation to kind of like yeah, so like it marked me. And also like because there's also this thing I mentioned the other day about like flourishing, and how like I wish I had a moment that I flourished, and I really kind of like did something, I excelled at something, and that it did not happen in that event. But I remember that the fact that it didn't, it made me a little frustrated, because I thought that just it would be kind of like instantaneous, like I'll be put on spot and it's going to happen, and that did not happen. So I don't know. I remember this other classmate of mine, he was from the same class, and we were in the same committee. And I remember he was frustrated when he was seeing like our grades, because they do assess your performance, like in these events. And we had some similar grades, and he kind of like talked a lot more than I did. And I remember that he was upset. It's not the first time. I think that there was a certain academic, rivalry there, because usually like I was top of my class, and he too. So there's that. But anyways, when I think about I think that this is something that's been happening a lot this past few days, like where I guess like you could call them intrusive thoughts, where basically I do something that for once, like those are not dangerous things that I do, that dangerous, like physically dangerous things, but it's been happening in my head, where sometimes I'll just do something crazy and I'm like, oh my god, I can't lose. I have to kind of like watch myself. It's kind of crazy, because it's like I'm not gonna do that, but I know sometimes like these feelings they come, from like such intensity, and stuff like, for example, like just throw my phone out of a window, just kind of like kiss somebody, or like let me just turn off the lights. There's nothing like damaging necessarily. I mean, like kissing one could be harassment. So there's that, but like kind of like turn off the lights, as I said, when the class is going. So it's just like very simple things, but they have been happening with so much intensity that I'm kind of concerned. I'm like, okay, is that something happening to me? Because when it's something dangerous, I know, to kind of like, not necessarily to ask for help, but I know to kind of like talk to people around me, like, hey, this, thought came to me. It could be nothing, it could be something. Only time will tell. But yeah, so the point is, I was shy when I was in high school, and to some extent even before that, because I think that I was generally, in a lot of ways, I was, how do I put this? Because I was in familiar environments, so like I was feeling familiar, so I could just be myself. But there were examples of other, sometimes like I would find myself in a place where I kind of like was shy, and I know this doesn't sound particularly consequential, but it is a huge development for me to be able to accept and acknowledge the fact that, like, oh yeah, I was shy, I'm still shy, I'm not going to I don't know, it's naturally the question, kind of like, that's a question that, I have, is like, should I be more outgoing? Because when I was a kid, before my traumas, when it was just like, that is me, that's my personality, like, I was outgoing. So, should I be more outgoing right now? And I'm definitely like not as shy. I'm thinking about, because I've been to like various different colleges. I've been enrolled to like, I think some of them were like the same course, but so it's kind of like six, right? Because there was the one in Portugal, and there was the one I started studying, then there was the one after that, Sapachi, Wangi. This is like the sixth college I'm enrolled to. As I said, like some of this were the same degree, same major, but all the other ones were different things, and I don't know, like when I'm thinking about my first ever college experience back in 2019, I like was, I don't know, like it was pretty chill. Like I wasn't really super out there, but like I did make friends, and with those friends I was pretty open, and I kind of like felt. I don't know. I think there was like a certain camaraderie. You could argue with some, professors. So I was already changing there, but then I changed to a different college, and it was kind of like the beginning of everything. And I think that every time I started, I found people, but then I ended up moving on to like a different institution, different course, and I kind of like left that behind. And it is interesting for me to kind of like see how depending on the environment, I feel more willing to for example, to speak out about something, and because usually for example, talking about me feeling the urge of like saying something whenever there's like something like that. It's like, I think when there's like a confrontation, I always feel kind of like tempted to jump in, but when it's just a conversation, just something like that, I kind of, it's not that I freeze necessarily, but I don't, because that's the thing, like I no longer have the excuse that like I don't want to interact, which was kind of like what happened a lot when I was, for example, in high school. And like these days I'm trying to interact, I'm trying to engage, and I just don't know. So yeah, so sometimes like there's something stopping me and I don't know exactly what, and so there's, as I said, shyness, but shyness has to do with fear, right? So I'm kind of like tackling my fears, lately. So this is a fear, that I should tackle, right? Social anxiety. Once again, great that I can acknowledge this, because for the longest time I made a point of like I don't have social anxiety, I just don't care, which once again, both things can be true. Like I didn't want to interact with people, because there's also the fact that I think that for a long time, like I really was worried about the aspect of like me being able to trust people, because the trauma that I have, like I like I kind of like that really burnt me. So I started to look around and I didn't really feel like I could trust anyone, like not only to know what happened, the truth, but also in general. And I think that is something I have to examine more. And I'm gonna write this down, because I'm gonna wrap this video, because I think I need to go to the bathroom. But I don't know, it's kind of interesting, because I think right now I'm getting back to a point where I trust people, and this is like a work to me. Like years in the making, getting to this point where I don't feel kind of oppressed by the notion that you have to trust somebody, because as I said, like that was something that really bugged me. Before I was very much yeah, like I didn't feel safe, and that's pretty much how this connects with the other thing. So there are various reasons why I haven't felt safe before. Some of them, like your physical, because the things that compromise your physical safety, like they also have like an impact on your on your head. So like yes, you're being physically harmed, but and as I said, like you've been physically harmed, and now you cannot really trust anybody ever, because you feel kind of betrayed. Oh, this is also something interesting for me to kind of like reflect upon, because in a certain way I felt betrayed in that situation. When I was 13, even the other religious trauma that I have, like it came from a place of like, okay, like you were supposed to protect me. I was a kid. I was a child, and I was violated, and you did nothing about it. How can I trust you to not fuck up again? And that was yeah, that was a fear that translated to the church and everybody involved in it, to my parents to some extent, because like they were the ones who sent me to camp. It was nobody's fault. I mean, it is one person's fault, but it's still like I think I was I think it was valid for me to like no longer feel like I could trust people, because like that trust had been breached. And I talked about this before, how my tendency ever since the trauma had been to, instead of like I don't blindly trust people, I kind of like I'm taking people at face value, and when they do something that proves to me that I can trust them, then I will, but not before that. And I don't know, it's just very, it has kind of changed. I think I've been giving people the benefit of the doubt lately, which I didn't used to do. So progress, but I understand. Like I understand that. Maybe a part of me will never be able to fully trust a person. Also, it doesn't help that sometimes I get delusional and I think that I can protect myself from certain situations, which I possibly can. Talked about this before. Like I think I fully believe that if somebody tries to mug me, I'm going to be able to to resist it. And I know that sounds crazy, but like I truly believe that. So just situations. And also it's kind of interesting how we translated a lot of like, because I think that after that situation that was pretty violent, my thoughts, they became more violent as well. Like they were yeah, like I think that things existed more in an aggressive way. So for example, we're having a conversation, a heated conversation, my head wants to put that into like a physical altercation. Like my head wants something to be done. And because I feel like it's kind of like how like violence became kind of like a language that like make me feel safe, make me feel secure in my place, because like because yeah. So so I'm gonna wrap this up right now. Like this honestly, this last topic, like I can go on for days, and I probably will at some point, because this is very much rooted on the it's very much at the roots of like a lot of like my fear. They come from like that experience, and that's pretty much what I meant when everything ends up like getting back to that. That's kind of like 5 degrees of separation between anything I'm afraid of and that situation, like that trauma. And it's kind of like how even like all the traumas that I had, that they were not physical, like they still kind of affected me. They kind of like my head found the solution to be, it's kind of like, because that's pretty much what you think, right? You want to fight back, and that is in itself and as I said, like there's this delusional part of me that is really believing that some of these things I could take some of these things without dying, without getting badly hurt. And I know that that is bullshit, but that doesn't change the way that like my head thinks. Maybe not thinks the way that my head feels, my heart feels, whatever. Anyways, bye.